To me, the most important thing is just embracing the power of the pause. There are so many times that we just let momentum take us, and being able to take a breath, pause, whatever that is, even just taking a breath can really allow us to reconnect with what we want most.
Some experts chase attention, but the smart ones build authority. You're listening to the Authority on Demand podcast, where credibility becomes your competitive advantage. Every week, we're pulling back the curtain on how founders and leaders turn expertise into inbound demand through books that position, media that converse, and strategies that actually move the needle. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, your host and Chief Creative Officer at Authority on Demand. Now, let's turn your authority into leverage. Okay, everybody, we're going to start off with a question today. Have you ever felt crispy? Not like perfectly toasted bread crispy, more like burnt around the edges, one more meeting away from completely falling apart crispy. Our guest today calls it corporate crispy, and it's kind of a pretty accurate description because I've heard nearly half of American workers are experiencing that right now. Well, Lindsay Barnett has spent 2 decades transforming workplace cultures in Fortune 500 companies and startups before she hit her own breaking point. Instead of quietly exiting, she founded Barnett Coaching and wrote Working Hell to Working Well, making your company work for you. And we're here to talk all about it today. So, Lindsay, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Danielle.
Hey, real quick before we jump back in, if you're loving what we're doing here, hit that subscribe button and drop us a like. We're bringing you the best authors, the most real conversations, and all the writing wisdom that you didn't know you needed. So stick around because it only gets better from here. All right, now let's get back to the conversation. Of course. I mean, your topic is something we're all dealing with, feeling a little burnt out and crispy around the edges. I love the metaphor there. Kind of makes me feel hungry. But yeah, let's chat about you before we talk about the book. I mean, you describe yourself as having been corporate crispy yourself. So tell
Yeah.
us about that, like what was it like for you when did you realize you reached that point?
I mean, I feel like I've reached this point many times actually. So I think that, burnout is talked about quite a lot now. But I've had my moments of disengagement, and whether it's a boss change or working on projects that just don't give me energy. So it's actually not a one-time instance.
Mm.
Even becoming a mom as a new mom, burning the candle at both ends. So, this is something that, finding our own resilience, finding the tools that support us, this is an ongoing thing. It's really about how can we learn to spot it so we can nip it in the bud before we're really, I know some people who are ending up in the hospital, right? We don't want to end to the place
No.
where we're working ourselves sick.
Right. Right. Well, hey, I mean, I'm glad that you took those experiences and here you are now, like helping
Yeah.
others get out of that. What was that push when you realized you had to start your own like firm and help people like get over this? Was there like a certain catalyst that made you make that choice?
I mean, honestly, I was laid off. So
Um,
I had the option to go out on my own or try to find another job, or, whether in my own company or otherwise. So for me, it was something that I had really been playing with for a long time. When I went to business school a couple decades ago, I thought I was going to be an entrepreneur, and I just kind of kept, loving where I was working and what I was doing. And so this was really the opportunity for me to do something that I'd wanted to do for a long time. So it's kind of, I equate it to, the baby bird getting kicked out of the nest a little bit, where you're like, yes, I'm going to do it now. Now is the time. The universe has responded.
Yeah, I mean, I would call it more of like a blessing in disguise, really. Like I'm sure that first moment you realize you're laid off, you're kind of like, oh no, what am I gonna do? And then, you know, I'm wondering if you would have made that shift if it hadn't been for that.
It's interesting because I had shifted to part-time. So during the pandemic, so many companies were like, what do you want? Work from home. Great, right? Like it was the opposite end of the spectrum of
Mhm.
where we are now. And when my company offered part-time schedules, I was kind of dying from the pandemic from not literally, thankfully, but I had two young elementary school age kids, not in school on the regular, working a full-time job. So for me, the gift of flexible working allowed me to still stay and contribute at my company, but also start a little bit of that transition for myself of being part-time. What is it like to have a different type of time and space, really, to do the work that I enjoy doing?
Understood. Okay, yeah. So I guess it's all about like that mindset then, like how you use that time and those changes. And speaking of changes, and also a good segue into the book itself, one of the main points you make, you emphasize small intentional changes, creating powerful shifts. So
Mm.
tell us a little bit about that. What does that mean exactly? And can you give us an example of a shift that someone can make that can create a large impact?
Yeah, so I'll share a story that's in the book where a friend of mine had wanted to get healthier, right? And so you take this very macro level challenge of, how do I get healthier? Is it eating? Is it exercise? Sleep, right? There's so many different ways that we can create change for ourselves once we have kind of a goal in mind. And
Right.
the only thing she did was buy a bigger water bottle. But that small intentional change, she lost weight, she had more energy, her skin cleared, right? Like, I love the metaphor of that water bottle, how when we make an intention and commit to it, even those little changes can really make a big difference.
Right. No, I see that. Yeah, and I love that example that you had in there. It's interesting because you don't think about how like even those small shifts can do anything. You know what I mean? It's kind of just like a little thing you don't realize, but there you go. It's just a ripple of impact.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. And it's an easier hurdle to get over, right? I
right.
find sometimes when we think of these really big, hairy goals, they can be motivating in some ways, but they can also put us in kind of a stuck land. And so,
Yeah.
finding the baby steps can really, one baby step each day can start to add up to a mile, right? Versus thinking about I'm going to run a mile. I keep using these, kind of more physical analogies because I think everybody can relate to that. Sounds way more daunting than just take an extra step.
Exactly. Yeah, and also it's more specific too, right? I mean, like, especially in terms of like a book like this, you need to have specific examples and steps. I see why you did that and why you made that choice to
Yeah,
include in your book.
yeah,
So
yeah,
that's an amazing point. Anybody listening today, if you want to learn more about those changes, well, just pick up the book, and I'm sure you have even more examples and
yeah.
very actionable steps. But that's not the only advice you offer in the book. You also talk about individual and systematic challenges. So how do readers know when it's time to work on changing themselves versus when it's time to just leave the workplace?
Yeah. It is hard. It is a hard decision. I think part of why I wrote the book the way that I did is I find, every organization has its some degree of dysfunction. And so, we're always going to be making some form of trade-offs in what we most need and what we're getting from our organizations. And so to me, and some of this had to do with, the path that I took, how I've guided a lot of my clients in figuring out what they need. If you start there, it's a lot easier to figure out, can this organization meet my needs? Because we've spent the time and energy identifying what it is that we do need to get out of work, to have satisfaction, to have what we need out of life. It's very easy to just say this organization and all of that. But when we start from the place of our own needs, we can uncover a lot more possibilities than maybe if we start from what the organization offers, because we're just starting with what we think is on offer. There may
Mm,
be more available. Just to give an example, when I went part-time, all of a sudden I was getting calls from these other senior leaders saying, "Hey, how'd you do that?" Right? But you needed somebody to show you that something was possible that you never thought could be possible. So starting with the individual needs usually can open up more possibilities.
understood. I get that. And, clearly your example of it, and you have many examples in the book too. So people have a lot to learn from this. Let's transition a little bit into the book itself, like the writing
Yeah.
process too, because as authors, we do deal with the same stuff that you're describing, but more
Yeah.
specifically, I'm sure people in the writing sense are also dealing with their own like burnt edges, trying to get their books out there and just hitting walls or feeling just, you know, exhausted from the process. So, I
Yeah.
have some specific questions. Tell me a little bit about, what it was like for you, creating the book.
So this was one of the other gifts of my being laid off was I actually had time.
Mm,
So, I left my company at, middle of December, took some time off, and come January, I just dug into let's create an outline. What are our chapters going to look like? Let's create a little bit of a project plan. So I created that time and space for myself intentionally. I had a little bit of wiggle room because I was fortunate to have some severance pay to help me kind of work it out. And
right.
I also knew my business. I knew that it would take a little while for me to actually get paid work. So I was able to kind of find a balance of what am I doing for the book and what am I doing to start, really being in business. So a lot of it was just planning my time and my chapters and how I was going to do my writing.
Understood. Yeah, no, that's great, and I'm glad that you kind of were able to make that step, though. Like, I'm sure that kind of just was a big leap, especially going from like helping others, guiding them and advising them to then shifting gears and talking about yourself and writing vulnerably. I'm wondering if there's any stories within the book that maybe were more vulnerable than others that we anything that was challenging to rehash and we're putting into the book.
Um,
Or maybe.
Great question. It's a great question. I mean, I think I've tried to integrate a lot of my experiences that, some were great and some were really hard. I think just trying to take some of that uh, challenging experience and walk away with what did I learn from it? I think in all honesty, like the book was really a great experience in taking that time to reflect and to be able to make sense of my experiences and discover new ways of looking at them and connecting the dots. So it really was a great experience for just processing.
Understood. Yeah, no, that's what a lot of authors relate to as well. I think it comes to those, again, those burnt edges and those times when we're feeling, just low on energy, rehashing and processing like that can help us, just to like analyze what we're feeling and figure out what to do moving forward. And that's just one thing I'm thinking in terms of like a writer's sense too.
Yeah.
But to transition on, you also narrated the audiobook by yourself, which is super cool.
Yeah.
I'm not too familiar with audiobooks. Well, creation of it. I'm a ghostwriter, I'm an editor, but audiobooks is new territory. And so I think that's something
Yeah.
very interesting. What was that process like
So
of creation?
it was it was tiring, but it was great. I learned a lot. I was very fortunate. I worked with a very talented producer who does a lot of audiobooks, and he really spent some time with me just, you know, helping me understand how an narrating an audiobook is different than reading a book, and how I was going to have to maintain my energy levels and watch my voice inflections and intonations and just breathing. So, all of those things were definitely challenging, but I was able to take breaks, and I really trusted him to tell me, okay, that reading, are you tired? Do you need a break? There wasn't the same energy level that you had in the other parts of the book. And so then we would take a break. So he gave me some, very kind direction, but I also do a lot of public speaking. So for me, standing up and speaking, I'm used to being on my feet for hours, working with teams and organizations. So it wasn't too foreign for me, thankfully. But I could see how for others it could be very exhausting.
Right, exactly. Yeah, well, that's very fascinating. I mean, I'm just imagining what it must be like to not only, work on a book so extensively chapter by chapter, but then speak it out loud, over and over, and it must be tiring, but at least you must know the book front to back at this point. So,
I
that's
think,
great. Yeah.
yeah, I think what was fun about it was I felt like I could read the book in the way that I hope people got from me what I wanted them to, right? When you read a book, you're drawing your own conclusions a little bit of how an author meant something to come across. And, you know, I like to be light and fun and positive. And so I think for me, it enabled me to have that energy in my book reading where I could have a little bit of kind of, inside joke with the reader or listener for that matter, I guess.
Understood. And I guess it also kind of adds to like building your audience. So, kind of like having that relatability to them too. And for any future projects, that they have that connection to, they'd be more inclined to,
Yeah.
follow along or even more so check out your consulting work or whatever
Yeah.
it might be. But since I said that, I think that's a good segue into, what's next. You have the book out, you have the audiobook. What's next on the agenda for you, Lindsay?
Yeah. I mean, I really, I'm continuing to do a lot of the work that I do already around coaching and, one-on-one group team coaching and leadership development. I think for me, what I really love is when a leader reads the book and wants to really support their teams in transitions or part of a bigger transformation, but wanting to make sure that people don't burn out.
Mhm.
So, to me, that is the best thing is to do what I do already, but add that well-being lens to it so that leadership development isn't just about being a great leader, it's also about being a great leader that creates, environments that are supportive of the whole person and that really can, make them feel like they can be seen and have work-life harmony.
Understood. Well, hey, that's, really exciting stuff. So people want to say stay up to date with all that though and connect with you and, get in touch. Where's the best place to do so?
Yeah, I love connecting with people on LinkedIn. I try to post there regularly. And otherwise, you can find me at barnettcoaching.com. And the book website is workinghelltoworkingwell.com. And so that has a lot of the freebies that are in the book to refer people to in terms of tools and resources that can support them and, creating greater work-life harmony for themselves.
I love that. And you hear that thing, guys. There's freebies for you to just check out and to
Yeah.
improve yourself and your work-life balance. I love that.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll definitely have links in the description box of this podcast so you can click on over
Great.
and get in the know. But as we begin to wrap up, I just have to know, if somebody did want to make a change in their life, that we talked about small steps and everything like that, what's something they can do as soon as this episode ends to get themselves on the right path? Like one small action, what would you say?
To me, the most important thing is just embracing the power of the pause.
Mm.
So there are so many times that we just let momentum take us, and being able to take a breath, pause. Am I acting in alignment with my intentions? Is this, am I saying yes to this? Does that mean I'm saying no to something else? Or is this how I want to show up today? Right? So, whatever that is, even just taking a breath can really allow us to reconnect with what we want most.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that. That's a great piece to like lead us off on, and I like that. Just having that pause, take a moment. Just that's something that a lot of people just don't do these days. We're always going, going, going.
I know it's
So
really hard. It's really hard. We're very
yeah,
distracted right now.
understood. Yeah, I mean, but all you need to do is take that breath and reassess yourself and figure out what you got to do. And if you need guidance in that, everybody, well, Lindsay's the one for it. Head over to the links that we put, and
Yeah,
she's here to help you out. So perfect stuff. But thank you so much for coming on today. It's been a pleasure to meet
yeah,
you and hear about your, experiences and your theories. And everyone, check out the book online. It's all you can do.
great.
It's been a
Thanks,
pleasure.
Danielle. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, yeah, of course. And to everybody listening today, if this conversation gave you permission to make that small change, take that small step, or even set just a boundary, well, share this episode with somebody, or share the book with somebody, and that's the only way that the ripple effect works, right? So,
Yeah, yeah.
all right, keep writing, keep inspiring, and keep leading. We'll see you next time on the Authors on Mission podcast, everyone. That's a wrap on another episode of the Authority on Demand podcast. If today's conversation sparked something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Share this episode with a founder or a leader who's ready to stop being the best kept secret in their industry. If you want to turn your expertise into inbound demand, head to authorityondemand.com to see how we help clients go from unknown to in demand. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, and I'll catch you on the next one. Now, go build some authority.